Hello, everyone. I'm really excited about today's conversation. I'm going to be talking to Ashley from You Need a Budget. You Need a Budget is one of those apps and methodologies that I love recommending to people. And so I'm excited that we get to have a conversation about it. And I see her that she just joined. So let me go ahead and invite them. Alrighty, I think we are good to go. I think they're going to join us here in just a second. If you see me looking over there, it's because I'm looking at Corey. Ashley, it's so great to talk to you today.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going great. You know, the hardest part of my day, I think, is over, which is just getting the Instagram live set up. And so I'm delighted about this conversation. Like I was saying, you probably saw me talking about, I love You Need a Budget. Me and the team are really excited about having you on and talking about this. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm glad that all the Instagram live setup was on you and I just had to join. So thanks for doing it all.
Right? That's what I realized like 10 minminutes ago. I was like, oh, I'm setting this one up. My team has done a great job on that, but it's just one of those things that I remembered, during the prep.
Yeah.
All right, Corey, you gonna hang out there? No, I'm gonna go back there. All right. Corey was over there helping and making sure. Close my door, please. Alrighty. So before we dive right in, because I'm super excited, let's get everybody oriented. One, who are you? And what is YNAB, and why is it such a great tool for your financial intelligence and sovereignty?
My name is Ashley. I'm so happy to be here. I get to talk about my two favorite things, which is personal finance and planning today. So I've been excited all day. YNAB is a budgeting app, and it's more than that. There's a method behind the app, and I have tried all through my 20s. I tried many different apps, tried many different systems, and failed. And I kind of thought, I'm just bad at money and this is my lot in life, and maybe I'll figure it out when I'm older. But it really wasn't until YNAB gave me the clarity, seeing where my money was going. And when I had that clarity, I was able to build a plan. So with YNAB, I got my finances organized. I paid off $20,000 worth of debt. So I'm excited to talk about some strategies, debt payoff strategies with you today.
Ashley, I love that. There are two principles from YNAB that are really great fits for our audience that I just tell people about all the time. One is just the mindset that your money works for you and every dollar has a job.
Yeah.
Your money works for you and every dollar has a job. And that, when you really understand that, is important. The second thing, well, we'll start there. Tell us a little bit more about how generally that helps people, but specifically that helped you in your use of YNAB and on the journey that you were on.
Financial stress, I feel like, can show up in every part of our lives, whether we're talking personal or work. One of my coworkers described his debt as this additional family member, somebody who had to have a say in every decision he made, from where he lived to when he got married to the types of tools that he could buy for his craft. And he had to miss out on conferences and courses that maybe would have helped accelerate his career because of this debt. For me, I almost think of financial stress. I think it was like this low hum of anxiety that
Yep.
I'm not sure I even fully realized was there until it was gone. My finances were in such a jumble. It was hard for me to even bring myself to look at my bank account. And when I did, I had to do all this mental math. And as a productivity writer, you know that is a recipe for disaster, because our brains are not a great place for having to store all that information. So not only were my finances disorganized, but I had that guilt of thinking, I'm an adult now, I should have this all figured out. And it wasn't until I learned give every dollar a job and really taking control that I was able to pay off the debt and create a plan for my life.
What I love about that, Ashley, is, and we have to get real about this, is on most things, if we see numbers, like if we're looking at a spreadsheet and it's just got normal numbers, we're fine in many ways. We can do, we can do the calculations, we can do the formulas. But if you put a dollar sign in front of that, it adds a lot of emotion and a lot of
Yes.
charge to that situation. And there ends up becoming so much shame, so much regret, so much guilt around debt, around what's going on with the money when we don't have it, that like your friend mentioned, like your colleague mentioned, becomes this additional rider to the conversation. And it's the type of thing that like we can't address, like you can't do, it feels like you can't do anything about the decisions you made in the past. It feels like maybe if someone would have taught you how to be an adult sooner, or maybe if you grew up in different circumstances, like your situation would be different. And so it gets so charged that you don't even know how to engage with it.
Yeah.
And so I want to address that for a lot of people, because our decision-making processes really do go haywire in a lot of ways when we put that dollar sign in front of a number, and it's about our own personal sort of stuff. And that's, it's like the difference when you're at work and you're managing the budget of a program, maybe not as charged as when you go home.
Yes.
And you're managing your household finances, right?
Definitely.
So the other thing that I love about YNAB is the methodology around not just giving everything a job, but getting to the place to where you're pre-funding the things that you want to do. Like, you get to have something that really matters to you end up in your budget. So for instance, when Angela and I are using YNAB, we have a wellness bucket that we fund, and we sit down and we talked about it, and it's like, what does that mean? And how much money per month does that look like? And what are the different ways that might go? Like, if I go to get a massage, does that come from the wellness bucket, or does that come from the health bucket, right? Mm-hmm. We can make different choices like that, but it's really important. It was important for us because it was like, how do we fund our values and make sure that it shows up? Because if we don't do that, we're either going to be making willy-nilly purchases.
Yes.
Or we're not going to do the things we actually like to do because we feel like we're always pushing ourselves financially and things like that, right? Yes. So in your journey, how did that work? I mean, I am guessing so much of your journey was about funding your debt paydown plan. But I'm wondering what you also did such that while you were funding that debt paydown plan, you were doing things that actually were nourishing, or doing things that took care of Ashley in the moment, while Ashley in the moment was taking care of Ashley in the past.
Yes. I think that a lot of us who have a big debt number can get so focused on that number. And yes, there's a lot of talk about intensity when it comes to a debt pay down. You can live off rice and beans for a certain amount of time and put every penny towards that debt. But what I think is even more important, and I think you probably would agree, are the underlying habits. Because let's say you pay off that debt, but if you haven't built the habits underneath, it's so easy to fall right back in it. And I went on vacation. I did fun things during that debt pay down, because you're right. When your budget is your plan, and you have to have that stuff that's going to nourish you. And when you see progress, I think that sustained progress is so much less stressful, so that you can still have the fun things. So if somebody's listening and building their own debt strategy, as you're looking at those non-monthly expenses that we talk about at YNAB a lot, I think some of those should be really fun things that make you excited to look at your budget. Because yes, a budget is a powerful tool for paying down debt, but it's also the way that we're building the lives that we all want.
Absolutely. And you're building the lives today. And that's where you have to be careful. And I'm going to talk to those members of our audience who are creatives or change makers or entrepreneurs. So much about the decisions we make today are sort of paid off in the future, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm going to make this choice and some future version of me is going to be way better off. And that works for some of our decision making. But if you put too much of the fun stuff in the future and all the pain now, at a certain point, that's where you're going to fall off of the habits that are actually going to lead you there. So I'm not at all saying, if you're listening to this and like, didn't Charlie just say I didn't have to pay down the debt? No, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is we have to balance some of these things, because if it's always future oriented, that is when it comes to habit formation or getting momentum, whether it's your work, your career, your relationships, or your money, that's where people fall off. At least I've seen. Have you seen that with YNAB users as well?
What we've come to find is that if you think of the debt pay down strategy in 4 steps, so you think, I'm going to list out all of my debts, which sounds easy, but that can be, like we talked, it's so charged with emotions. I still remember sitting down at the kitchen table and having to make that list, which is not fun, but there is power in owning it and saying, this is what I need to get done. I don't have that worry about what is out there. So you're coming from a place of power. So you've made your list. You are covering your monthly bills and expenses, and all the minimum payments on those different debts that you have are considered a bill. Step number 3 is to fund and save for the non-monthly expenses. And this is where I think sometimes people who fall back into debt, might miss this step because this is things like insurance premiums, holiday spending, that car repairs, that maybe that's what put us in the debt in the first place. So as you're building your debt plan, we can't forget these non-monthly expenses. And then the last step is to pick one debt and focus on. And there's lots of different strategies depending on if people want to pay off the smallest balance first or the one with the biggest interest rate, whatever. I think this is kind of a thing where you have to know yourself. I went with the smallest debt first. But as I'm paying off that focus debt and paying the minimums on the rest, I'm never forgetting about those non-monthly expenses. And some of them should be fun, I think, too.
Absolutely. Well, where a lot of this ties into what we teach at Productive Flourishing is, getting out of debt, or, if you're already out of debt and you're trying to figure out ways to have your money work more for you, right? That, if you're not used to it, is itself a project, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where people fall down, especially, it's New Year's, people are thinking, I'm going to get out of debt, I'm going to make my money. And that's a great aspiration or goal. But it starts to become, how are you going to make a project out of that? How are you going to set a timeline to it? How are you going to have some specific goals? Who's going to be your success pack around this? And so that it's actually, when you're looking at it, you look at all the things you're doing this month, and there might be a reminder up there of like, hey, you also have this project.
Yes.
You also have this thing that you're doing, and how does this project or this priority line up with the other choices that you're making, right? And I think that's where I've seen so many people get in trouble, is that they put the way they make decisions about their money and finances in sort of this separate category from their day-to-day life. And then their day-to-day life sort of rules, right? And so you have to weave that in there and make it a project, especially if you're in a place where, for whatever reason, you're really uncomfortable with your situation. It's kind of like the more uncomfortable you are with your situation, the more it does need to be a project that takes, actually around here we talk about your 5 projects rule, which is no more than 5 active projects per time horizon, right? And so if you're really serious about this and you're at a place where you got to make a change, one of your 5 projects for maybe that year might need to be, getting out of debt, or, figuring out how to leverage the income. Because I know, we talk so much with YNAB about the debt side of things, or about financial stuff around the debt side of things. And there's this other flip side of what happens when you're out of debt. How do you use that well? And especially, I'm going to go there. I'm not supposed to, but I'm going to go there. Especially women in our society who are not taught about investing and not taught about those types of things. The default becomes like, just save more and more money, which is not a bad thing. But there's also, how do you get your money to work better for you? So how does YNAB in the methodology really help people make a project out of the abundant side of the financial equation, like how to get the money to work better for them?
So I mentioned that I think of the budget as a tool for building the life that you want. So my life will look different than yours, than different from somebody who's listening. But what's so powerful is that the budget is completely customizable. So anything, any little hope or dream or a value that I want in my life, I think needs to be reflected in my budget. My first manager at YNAB told me, right, like it was my first week, and she said, I should be able to tell so much about you by looking at your budget. And I love that. And so every single time I'm feeling a little off, I go back in and I look at my categories. So if that is traveling, adoption, wanting to figure out if you can leave your 9 to 5, do something different, start your own company, all those things can be categories in your budget. You can set a goal, and YNAB will tell me every single time I get paid how much money I need to put in that category to fund that goal. And I think that's where the magic is. And that's why I just wish I could go tell 25-year-old me that budget is not a bad word. It doesn't have to be. It's just a tool that we have in our arsenal.
Yeah, it's not a bad word. And really for me, I would like us from budget to be that painful discipline thing, to actually it being the structure that allows us to do what we want to do, right? It's actually that gate. It is actually you making this choice of freedom in that moment, that this is how I'm going to have this money work for me. Yeah. In Start Finishing, I talk about, when you're making a project plan, one of the things to consider is what's your budget for this project. And the reason, and people are like, what do you mean, what's my budget for the project? I'm like, well, that closet of doom that you've been meaning to get to, right? It turns out if you're able to say, okay, this thing has been on me for like 2 years. I want to get this done. I'm willing to create a budget of $500. And with that $500, I can have a personal, organizer come and help me with this, right? It gives you different ways of doing that. And maybe that's not in your YNAB budget, but it's a way of thinking for people of like, this thing matters to me. This project matters to me. And if I'm not willing to put some money behind it, what I've learned is people are not willing to put some money behind it. They're not really willing to make that thing happen, which means that's why it's been hanging out there for 2 years. So I'm talking about closets, backyard projects, getting fit, right? If you have a budget around that project, maybe you can hire a personal trainer, right? Maybe you can get a subscription to something like Peloton. But it's a useful way of framing it for people, like, how serious are you about this? Because it turns out if you put some money behind those projects and you give yourself the space to do that, it goes. And so that's another reason why I love YNAB, because whatever that project is for them, like maybe they want to start writing their first book. Okay, that's a great idea. Turns out, probably going to cost you something, right? Do you have the tech you need? Do you have the editorial support that you need? Like, do you have a budget for babysitters, right? What all might support you with that project? And again, I sound like a super champion for YNAB because y'all don't know.
I love it.
You don't know it, Ashley, but I've been doing this behind the scenes for a long time, which is why I was so excited. It's like, oh, I can go on the record and have all these conversations I've had with clients and friends and things like that. And it's so, so complimentary. But let's talk about it, because when you're sitting there with your partner, kitchen table, or sitting there by yourself, kitchen table, that's cool too. And you're like, here's the plan. And then 3 days later, you see something. You're like, maybe I want to do that. How do you handle the impulse spending, or just that realization that maybe you didn't think about something, but in that moment, this thing really matters to you? How do you do that with YNAB?
So we have rule 3 at YNAB is roll with the punches. So you have this plan, you have all the best of intentions, but things come up and priorities can change. And I think that was a big learning point with YNAB, is that something can change right in the middle of the month, and impulse spending doesn't always have to be bad. Maybe it's just an indicator of a shift that you've made. I think if you're looking for the best thing I have found, tomorrow is the last day of a 30-day no impulse spending challenge. So I could buy only essentials for 30 days. And the tool that I have found that helped me the most is a wish list. So creating, I want this thing, I would like it really now. I think it would help me in my work. I think it would be fun to have. Put it on the wish list and just let it simmer there for a little bit. And I can't tell you, I think in the last 30 days, I probably removed 5 or 6 things from that wish list that I thought right then I really needed, but ended up not. Another thing that you can do is, if you saw something and you think you really want it, it's something that we call at YNAB, find the money first. Okay, I'm going to have to overspend this category. Maybe it's a piece of tech that you have and you only have $100 in your tech category. This is $300. So instead of just buying it when the impulse hits and then having to figure out later, you have to go to your budget and find that $200. And that makes you have some good conversations with yourself. Do I want this thing more than this vacation I'm saving for, or my mortgage that needs to be paid in a few days? So having those conversations before you actually swipe your card, I think there's a lot of power there.
I love that. And what Angela's my wife, by the way, what we've seen when we do that is, it's like, you know what? Actually, this impulse thing that we want to do, it's the difference between eating out 2 more times this month. Do we want this more than eating out 2 more times when we think about that? Or like, how does that go? And we might decide that actually we might have to compromise on date night to make this happen, but that's a non-negotiable for us. So that thing's got to wait. Or maybe it's like, you know what, when it's time to go do our twice a year buy new clothes for the year. Yes, we're those people, right? It's like, maybe it's just one of those things where I know that like there's another shirt or 2 that I don't get then, right? So we decrease that budget in the future in that way. And so that's what I love about it, is because you can find the money, and the tool makes it easy to make that swap.
Yeah.
And it puts just 30 seconds or 5 minutes or 15 minutes between that now, right? And we haven't talked about like the psychology of buying, because we haven't talked about the psychology of, actually we talked about the psychology of some things. But I think what we sometimes don't understand with impulse purchases is that usually there's this dopamine hit that comes from the searching from the finding, And then, like we confuse the searching and the finding with the buying, right? And so a way to sort of cheat on this is you might like want to find a cute shirt, whatever that thing is, right? And like you can just celebrate finding it and separate that from buying it.
Mm.
And you still get the dopamine, but you don't have the pain of paying
Yeah.
because you didn't actually buy it. And similar thing, I learned this one actually from Profit First. So big shout out to Michael McAllowitz. He had a line in there, anything aside from the book, he was talking to a friend who would put something on his wish list and only buy it when it got really painful enough for him to buy it. So he might put something on there and deliberately not buy it at the time. This is for business things until he knew absolutely that he needed to buy it.
Wow.
And I started using it when I read Profit First, and it's been huge. So I'm like, you know what?
Here's what I found.
That new Apple, device really sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put that over in the wish list. Look at it again. Do I really need it today? Nope. Do I really need it today? Nope. And you look at it for like 6 months, and you either figure out I don't need it, or actually I've been thinking about this thing for 6 months. I probably better go ahead and get it at this point, right? And so it's separating, and this is important when we look at the digital shopping habits that some of us have that make purchasing so easy. Sometimes just putting it on that wish list and letting it sit for a while is the best way for you to either find the money because you really, really want it, or realize the purchasing was not what you wanted. You wanted a dopamine hit, or you were frustrated about some other problem that you couldn't solve, that you were using this false substitute to sort of go for.
Yeah.
Right. So really, really love that. Let's talk about your future selves, because similar to the YNAB methodology, is really comes down to thinking about your future self. So you all have a really good way of thinking about that. So sort of bring us into that conversation.
I think so many of us can be kind to our family members, kind to coworkers and people that we meet throughout the day, and put a lot on ourselves. I know that if I'm in a rush, I can leave a mess behind, and then me in the evening coming home, I'm like, oh my word, I have all this mess because I was rushing and couldn't take a few minutes. So I think if you could take that idea of thinking of yourself as this future version of you, and what kind of kindness can I do today to help that version of me? And you can think way into the future. Saving for retirement is a huge way of prepping that future version of us to be successful later in life. But you can scale it way back. And if I am saving for car repairs today, that's not a fun thing. Like I would much rather go buy shirts, which I do not buy just 2 times a year, but I would probably look into that system. But saving for car repair, not fun. But if I think about it as a gift to my future self, it makes it a little bit easier to save. And if I wouldn't hate for this to happen to me, but sitting on the side of the road, how grateful am I going to be to pass me for setting aside money? So I'm not having to grab a credit card and I have the money there to pay for the car repair.
Yeah, that's such a good overlay with what we talk about here at PF, which is how do you always take better care of your future self and the decisions that you're making today. And so something like there's so many overlaps, like we talked about leaving yourself breadcrumbs in projects, like when you're working on them, because you're deep in a project and you're like, I'm going to know how to get into this tomorrow, but then life happens and it's 3 weeks later and you can't get back into the project. Just taking that 10 minutes, right? Here's where I am. Here's what we're working on next. Makes it so easier for a future version of yourself to be like, oh, I'm so glad Ashley of the past took care of me and I know how to get started. I don't have to spend 30 to 45 minutes figuring this all out again, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Right. And so I see a lot of the interlinks there with like the budget, and the way that you do that is the past version of yourself, getting yourself set up so that when you need to make that decision in the moment, it's like, oh, thank you. Right. And that's not only is it that your money works for you, but your current self works for your future self. And what Ashley and I both want to remind you is that working for yourself doesn't mean that it has to be hard. It doesn't mean that you have to like go to that place of ramen and deprivation all the time, right? It can be intentional. It can be joyful. It could be wondrous. There's also some hard choices you might have to make, but it doesn't have to be that what many people think is punishment. So, all right, I got to ask Ashley. This 30-day challenge on the impulse spending.
Oh, yeah.
What was the hardest thing not to buy?
Dining out, 1,000,000%. There were so many days where just not feeling it at night and thinking, oh, I would just love to order takeout or go pick up Kava or Panda Express. But there has been a sense of accomplishment, I think, of like saying, I can overcome that. So yeah, it's a hard choice right then, but almost just that getting started. And once the meal has been cooked, I'm always so happy that it's been done. But yeah, dining out was hard.
Yeah, that would be mine too. Like I can sit on all sorts of other things. Obviously, I can buy shirts, buy clothes twice a year. But that one though, I'd be like, it's been a hard day, yo. And so I'm inspired. I might try that one. Well, I got to get Angela on board with this, so we'll see how that goes, right?
Yeah. If anybody watching is interested, we have a free, really cute workbook that you can download in our Instagram bio. So we called it the More Money Challenge, and it's been a lot of fun to do it as a group because, like you said, like finding that group of people that's going to help you be successful with whatever your project is for the year.
Alrighty. Ashley, thanks so much for joining us today. Again,
It was so fun.
I've had my lab energy. I was like, oh, I get to do it. So I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, we're having a great conversation. So as the guest for today's live, you get to leave our watchers and listeners with a challenge or an invitation, depending upon whichever most resonates with you. So based upon what we've talked about, what would you challenge or invite our watchers to do?
Okay, let me think about this for a second. I'm going to go with challenge. And I'm going to say that we have all collectively had a rough couple of years. And I know that for some people, January has not felt like that new year, going to tackle a lot of stuff. And it's been kind of hard to make that shift this year. But later this month, it's going to be February 22nd, 2022. And from what I've heard, I'm not super into numerology, but some of my coworkers are, and that 2 represents a culmination of hopes and dreams and realizing those. So if you can think of one thing that you'd really, whatever project you're working on this year, small or big, and commit to it and put, like you said, put some money behind it. If it is starting a garden, starting your own business, writing a book, whatever it is, put some time and money toward it. And if you are wanting to make a post about it, we actually are giving away $2,222 to one person who's making this commitment. So all that information can be found in our Instagram bio. And I've already started this morning and I've already been so inspired to see what people are working toward this year.
Great. Thanks so much for that. Am I going to be one of those people that get those 4 2s? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Y'all, we'll link up. Hopefully Nicole is going to be able to jump and link to YNAB's bio in the comments below. Ashley, thanks so much for joining us. I've been repping YNAB so much throughout this, not because they're paying me, but because we actually use it. And with my friends and our clients and the people in our academy, we have seen a marked difference in people's peace and intentionality and freedom with money by using YNAB. So Ashley, thanks for initiating this, or however we ended up here. Thanks for joining us. And I look forward to whatever our next conversation may be.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Cool. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.